Hi, this is Joel Duff, and today I come to you with something a little bit different. Those of you who follow this particular YouTube channel or have read my blog know that I write, read, talk about the intersection of science and faith. I am a Christian working in a scientific field. I am constantly thinking about how to integrate and understand my faith in light of the science that I know. And as such, I know others that are also engaged in both of those things. And one of those people is Dr. Francis Collins, a very well known scientist who also is well known for being a Christian, right? In the public arena, he's one of the best known Christians working in a scientific field. And as I'm going to show you, he has written about that, he has talked about it, and so forth. And I'm I'm here to talk about a little bit of my frustration with the way that Christians tend to cannibalize our own, or as my title here is, we cast stones at ourselves, right? As Christians, we can't seem to appreciate the things that other Christians are doing and the gains that other Christians have made and the positive impacts that they have made without somehow finding faults and sometimes making those faults much more important than their overall contribution. And so to me, that's a disheartening response that I've noticed in the reactions to Dr. Francis Collins' retirement from the National Institutes of Health. And this is a minority response. I mean, I've looked at the hundreds of responses on his to his tweet in which he announced his retirement a few days ago, and on Facebook to 1,000 responses there, and so many of them are so gracious, right? Just you know, effusive in praise of two things. And this is what's really remarkable, right? Effusive in their praise of what a tremendous scientist he is and the contributions he's made and how he's conducted himself as a National Institutes of Health director. With all these other scientists and guiding programs and distributing money to projects and so forth. All right, so wonderful praise there. But then at the same time, um, so many responses of Christians who have said they've been inspired by him, individuals who have come and said they read his book, The Language of God, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, and saying that that was an important part of their coming to Christ, right? And thanking him for his expressing his his Christianity in his job and in the things that he does and the way he conducts himself. That's really an amazing achievement, and it's something that I think that we need to be thankful for, that we can have a person so public, as part of our federal government, that we can look at and say, this is somebody who we can look up to and who has influence in our federal government and who is influencing others in showing what Christians can do in the types of things that they can, um, the types of ways that they can interact with the non-Christian world and have a positive contribution. So should we be sending Francis Collins off saying, good and faithful servant, well done? Or, as some have said, good riddance. And those some who say that are almost always Christians who are saying that. So here's his announcement. It's been a privilege to honor and serve as NIH director for over 12 years. I don't believe anyone should hold this position too long, so with deep gratitude to this great agency and the people who carry out this mission, I've decided to step down. Now, he's stepping down, but he's going to continue to work in the agency in another capacity, basically going back to research, but he's also talked about how he's very interested in the problem of understanding truth and communicating truth. And by truth, he means that there is real truth, right? That there isn't, in this world of fake news and misinformation and so forth, finding the truth is become even more important. And the truth to him is, I mean, God's truth. right? And finding God's truth and then trying to understand God's truth in light of the other things we learn in this world and put it in that perspective is something that is very important to him, and I expect him to continue to talk about and work with. So Francis Collins got to start basically finding genes, and he's famous for finding one particular gene, his lab, finding one gene for cystic fibrosis, and that sort of was one of the major contributions to this gene discovery craze that began in the 80s. And it was very difficult to do at the time, and he developed techniques. He and his lab developed techniques for that, and eventually they found a bunch of other genes responsible for other significant genetic problems. And then he eventually took a position as the National Human Gene Institute as the second director there. Well, that's the institute that was responsible for overseeing the government project to sequence the human genome. And he was there with President Clinton when they announced the completion of the human genome. He then took time off from that. And between doing that and becoming director of Institutes of Health, he began a scientific apologetics or a Christian apologetics ministry called Biologos. And they're interested in understanding God's means of producing biological diversity in this world, understanding the creation of biological diversity. And it's to that he has created a number of different Christians who would very much disagree with his particular position in that area, and and some of those Christians are ones that are opposed to his particular position and call into question his his Christianity even at some point. He served as National Institutes of Health director for 12 years, appointed under Obama, approved unanimously by the US Senate, was well respected at that time and got all kinds of positive support, and then was reappointed by Trump. Everybody had rave reviews for him then, and he got reapproved though, and he was also reappointed by President Biden and also approved under him. That itself is a testimony to the respect that he has garnered across the aisle, all right, from multiple different groups, which often can't agree on anything else. So, as I said before, here he is in his younger years when he's finding that needle in the haystack, right? And he found this gene through this process called positional cloning of the CFTR gene. So, on his retirement, we have a number of Christians. As I said before, the praise is really quite effusive. So, I can't complain about the totality of what the overall community and most people think of Francis Collins. He really has garnered that much respect among Christians and non-Christians. So here's Timothy Keller, all right, famous Presbyterian Church of America pastor, the denomination that I've been part of for a very long time, who has struck up a friendship with Francis Collins and has podcasts and so forth with him at different times that are really fantastic to hear them discuss and talk about important issues in this day about science and faith, and talk about their faith. And then here's Russell Moore. I mean, he's a Southern Baptist Convention leader, and as he says, I admire greatly the wisdom, expertise, and most of all, the Christian humility and grace of Francis Collins. Cannot wait to see what God uses him next. And I can't either. I know that he's not done. He's 71 years old, but I'm sure he has plans. Here's Kenneth Keithley, who is a professor at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, so in the Southern Baptist Convention as well. And he says, Godspeed, Francis Collins. And here's somebody who I know doesn't agree with all of Francis Collins' positions and decisions that he has made as NIH director, and doesn't agree with every component of the things that, say, an organization like Biologos that he started is involved with. But he can still say, occasionally I have disagreed with him. but I admire the gracious and wise manner he always conducts himself. Collins is a strong Christian and a brilliant scientist who consistently glorifies Jesus. I'm thankful for you, dear brother. I can say those same words. Absolutely, completely agree with this sentiment about Francis Collins and the witness of his faith. But that's so now I come to the part where yeah, this is the main reason I'm even making this particular video, is because I want to explore a little bit of what I think is emblematic of the problems within the church, within Christianity right now, and how divided Christians are. And it comes out because Collins were he's actually not in a political position. National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, and so forth. They explicitly are a non-political, apolitical organization within the federal government. They're not allowed to, if you go there and you're on a panel or you're discussing proposals or something, you don't talk politics there. These are not considered to be political positions. Now, I know that all of life is political to some extent, but these individuals are put into place to make decisions that aren't supposed to pander to a particular political party, um, and so are independent in that way. But that hasn't, that hasn't, stopped people from politicizing his views and positions. And of course, he is, as the National Institutes of Health director, has been called on to say a lot of things about the current pandemic. In fact, right? So here we have, I've blocked it out because they're a friend of mine. So I have a lot of Facebook friends that are um, across a wide swath of different perspectives, I'll just say, political perspectives, right? So I have a good number that are on the very, I'll say, hard right side, and they're pretty much mostly taking this kind of approach to Francis Collins. Collins resigns as National Institutes of Health director, hopefully, right? Hopefully, because he just received a preserved evidence order from an attorney general in one of the states known to be preparing felony grand jury referrals against NA. Right? So he's all right. This is his report of Collins. He's resigning. Oh, hopefully because he just got a preserved evidence. Like he's scared of this potential for questioning some of the decisions that were made in his office about how money was going to be spent on various research having to do with coronavirus. Now, I don't know exactly what the conditions are of his decision to retire, but I seriously doubt that he is scared of this particular lawsuit or that he's afraid of things that he has said. I have read transcripts of what he has said, and I have also listened a lot to Francis Collins about the different things that he does and his different decisions he's made. But it's casting aspersions, right? This is a Christian. He's casting aspersions on Collins, and he's actually glad to see him go because this particular person very much, disagrees with everything that the government is doing in terms of the pandemic, and is very skeptical of these agencies, and so views Collins as really the enemy. And then over here we have the Center of Science and Culture. That's really the Discovery Institute, which is the intelligent design group, who has always been opposed to Collins because they disagree because Collins has said from his perspective as a Christian that he doesn't think that intelligent design is as a model for understanding the world is a very effective one. And so doesn't see that as a useful way of understanding the world. So here they're reporting NIH Director Francis Collins being praised as a national treasure, but his real legacy is anything but praiseworthy. And then their article is entitled "The Appalling Moral Failure of Francis Collins." Now, when I saw that, I knew where it was going to go. It was going to criticize several of his decisions as NIH director that they think are wrong. But to say moral failures of Francis Collins and to know anything about him, um, makes it very hard for me to take this organization seriously when this is clearly just a way of getting back at him and making their points that they've always tried to make. And what about this? All right, so here another person I know. About time, Francis Collins, NIH director, resigns after gain of function falsehood exposed. This is an innuendo that the reason why he's retiring is because, or resigning, is because of this gain of function falsehood exposed. Now, that's a whole complicated story about the whole gain of function. I find almost everyone who talks about that and thinks that's a story probably can't explain what gain of function research is and doesn't really understand it. They've just listened to, Rand Paul talk about it and believe he knows what it is. It's a complicated story, and I'm not sure if Francis Collins is completely had made all the best decisions in that area. I might disagree with some of his decisions. Are they immoral though? No, I definitely don't think so. But this is a Christian who is that's their response to Francis Collins, stepping down. Oh, that he's stepping down because of this controversy at NIH. Um, and then there's a response to that by an apologist, right? A Christian apologist. It's no surprise that an old earth compromiser is also compromising on truth and liberty. Not sorry to see him go. So here's somebody who, because Francis Collins doesn't believes that the world is old and doesn't believe it's young, right? That is a you know a fault that can't be overlooked, and he's glad that he's no longer NIH director because he's a compromiser on the age of the earth. Now that's what I mean by casting stones at ourselves. You know, who do you think is going to replace Francis Collins? A Christian of his magnitude? Very, very unlikely, right? Very unlikely. And who would you rather have in office? Somebody who is known for being gracious, known for being thoughtful, understands the science, makes decisions that people look at and recognize were decisions that were not necessarily ones they agreed with, but ones that were well thought out. It's ridiculous to knock down a Christian just because we disagree with some particular aspect of their theology or understanding of the scriptures, and somehow that disqualifies them from working for the people, when we should be celebrating Christians working in that environment and having that kind of influence and being seen by non-Christians who look at Francis Collins and say, that's a wonderful person. People should be like that, right? And they don't mean they should be like that because he's liberal or something like that, right? They mean they see him as a person who should be emulated, right? In the way that they fairly deal with other people. And that's something that we have to recognize and praise and be happy about. Um, and I am certainly thankful that he is a witness at that level. So I want to. Okay, all right. There's just so much I want to say here. Let me move on though. So if you search for Francis Collins' retirement, you'll find really radical responses. And I'm not saying this is reflective of the majority. Again, as I said, the vast majority is very, very positive. But as I go down and I just go one after another and look for anyone who has a negative response, and then I look at the profile of the person that has a negative response, it's invariably a Christian who proposes that they have the truth and that Francis Collins is immoral or completely wrong or a detriment to Christianity and therefore should be kicked out of that job because we don't want people like that in that job. So here's deplorable preacher at Jesus crucified, right? Jesus crucified. And so he's representing Christianity here. This is one of our top Luciferans, that is responsible for sacrificing thousands, perhaps millions, to his god Lucifer. His god Lucifer. He thinks that Francis Collins' God is Lucifer, that he bows to Lucifer. Um, Francis Collins will say to anyone who asks that he puts his trust, right, in Christ Jesus for his salvation. He's not counting on his own merits, the things he has done. He's an incredibly humble person, and he is throwing himself on the blood of Christ for his salvation. He is saying that he's a sinner and that he needs to be redeemed. I have news for Christians. Everybody's a sinner, all right? Francis Collins is a sinner. He's not a saint. He's not a perfect person by any means, but he is displaying the attributes of a Christian, even if you might find that there are some areas where he's just dead wrong, right? He's got his theology wrong, or he has a wrong opinion, right? Because we all do as Christians have areas and blind spots, right? He's not a top Luciferan. He's not working for the devil, right? If he's working for the devil, then there isn't any Christian that isn't working for the devil. Francis Collins has the spirit. As far as I can tell, he has the spirit of God in him. Let me talk about his books and then my own personal reflections upon Francis Collins and why I respect him, even as I myself might disagree. I don't agree with many of his ways of integrating science and faith. I don't think they're the best way. I don't agree with all of his theology. I would love to correct him on a few things myself. But in no way am I not going to celebrate his Christian witness. And I'm not going to denigrate that Christian witness at all. So going back to 2006, he wrote a book called The Language of God, in which he presents his evidence for belief. And again, I don't agree with everything in that book, but it's a valiant effort, and he really exposes himself. And then in 2010, when he is actually NIH director now, he writes this book, The Language of Life, and there he talks really just about science. So it's about DNA and the revolution in personal medicine. Now, I have to say something about this book. I have used this book in my own class, two classes. One is my genomics class. I have 30 students every spring, and this has been, although the last couple of years I haven't because it's getting a little bit old now, but for about 7 or 8 years, this was one of the books that I had my students read. And they really enjoyed this book. He grapples in this book with what have we learned from the genome revolution, what have we learned about our DNA, about diseases, explains it in wonderful layman's terms, but um, it gives a big overview of all the types of things and the techniques of that are coming up. But the most important thing for me in this book is he really gives a feel for some of the ethical issues, right? Of exploring your own DNA and finding out about like genetic testing and amniocentesis and a whole bunch of other issues. And he talks about in there the various moral issues that are involved and reasons why people object to different things. And he lays out the different positions. He allows um, me to have the students see the difficult questions that understanding biology will raise. Um, and many students have all kinds of questions there. And he is very careful about how he presents those different moral things. Now, present his Christian witness there, but it really does come out, in many of the ways he discusses these things. And so many people, are upset with Francis Collins. One of the big reasons is because of his stance on fetal tissue research. But you have to read his other works, and you have to actually hear him talk about abortion and his personal opinions on that, and the types of things he's wrestled with that particular question. He has a far more nuanced position and understanding of that topic than you probably recognize, and certainly that most people that are critics recognize, who have, I am sure, never read his books, never listened to his talks, never listen to him interact with other theologians and talk on these particular topics, to be able to understand why he holds some of the views that he does and how he wrestles with them himself. He's not a black and white, um, just here's the truth. I don't believe this. I believe that. He sees where um, there are hard questions without sometimes as simple answers as we'd like them to be. In 2011, while he's NIH director, he co-authors a book, The Language of Science and Faith, and talks about a whole bunch of difficult topics there as well. All right. So I've used this book. Students really love it, really get a lot out of it, and appreciate his writing and his compassion. The way he compassionately writes about genetic diseases, and the thinking behind why we do the types of research we do in order to discover disease and why that's important. Okay, but let's get right down to it and ask the question, what are the attributes of a Christian? What do we want to see? What does one display if one is a Christian? Right? How would you know someone's a Christian? And I talk about this with my friends all the time, because I say, here are these people that we have being held up before us, especially particular politicians that are being held up before us, and we're being told that they're Christians. And in a way, by saying they're Christians, when you talk to another Christian, it's sort of like, okay, now you have to vote for them, or you have to do this, or you have to follow them because they're a Christian. As if, okay, now they're a Christian, so therefore we know they will make right decisions. And so some of those people are looking at somebody like Francis Collins and they're saying, well, I don't like that decision he made over there. And because of that, I don't trust anything he does. And implicitly, or even sometimes explicitly, they don't even call him a Christian. Like the one tweet I had there, right? He's a follower of Lucifer. He's doing Lucifer's work, um, because of this one or two things that they think is that they think, and maybe rightly so, that he's wrong on that particular topic. So I want to back up and I just want to review, right? What does it look like to be a Christian? So let's look at Paul in Galatians 5, where he's talking about walking by the Spirit and not by the desires of the flesh. So Galatians 5:16, this is from the New American Standard. But I say to you, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. For the desire of the flesh is against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For those are in opposition to one another. Right? You're either in the flesh, following your fleshly desires, or you're in the Spirit. Being in the Spirit doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means that you're guided by the Spirit, and you are opposing the flesh, and you are working to remove those fleshly desires and from your life, in order to keep you from doing whatever you want. Right? But if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now, the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are, and then he lists some things that are evident things that are deeds of the flesh: sexual immorality, impurity, indecent behavior, idolatry, witchcraft, hostility, strife, jealous outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I forewarn you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Um, just for some of my followers who aren't maybe familiar with Christianity, this doesn't mean that if somebody is sexually immoral or indecent at some point. In other words, Christians sin, and every one of these could be sins that Christians do, and everyone would acknowledge that, right? They know a Christian who it displays one of these traits. But you can't be a Christian, right? You can't practice such things and inherit the kingdom of God. You can't practice things without remorse, without saying this is sin and working to remove that from your life and to be acknowledging it and repenting of it, right? You will have sin, but you need to repent of it and you need to drive yourself away from that sin. You can't revel in it. You can't be who you are identified by. In other words, if I look at somebody and their entire life is identified by these characteristics, and I don't see any other evidence, just saying I'm a Christian doesn't make you a Christian if you don't have any of these works, right? If you can't remove any of this and you don't see any sign of any, well, the next slide is going to be the attributes of what you should see in a Christian. All right. So what does it mean to be in the Spirit? But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now those who belong to Christ crucified the flesh with its passions and desire. That's what we're doing in Christ, right? We are crucifying the flesh. We are putting down the flesh and its passions and desires, and we're becoming more like Christ. Now, with this simple comparison that Paul has here, and we ask the question, if I just look at Francis Collins' life, even if I didn't know him, I've seen him talk, I've heard him talk many times. I know many people who know him personally and know him quite well personally. So I have a lot more familiarity with Collins than probably the average person does. But, and so I could say, looking at him and his life and the things he has exhibited and the things that people say about him that know him, I look at this list and I say, does he have love? Absolutely. Right? He has Christian love. He loves the people around him. He has joy. Oh yeah, you can definitely see the joy. It exudes from him, and it's the Christian sense of joy. He has peace. When he speaks, you can tell he has a sense of peace. That's why it's kind of nonsense to say to suggest, sort of intimate that, oh, he's retiring because there's this problem, or he thinks there could be this innuendo, or that he lied here, or that he's going to get in trouble for something, and so he's running away. No, he has peace in what he's done, and I fully expect that if he's done something that he regrets, that he will apologize for it and he'll ask for forgiveness, because that's what Christians do. They are sinners, they make mistakes, but they ask for forgiveness. He has kindness, right? He has goodness, he has faithfulness, definitely has gentleness. That's a common feature that is ascribed to him. Self-control, absolutely has self-control. Who doesn't have self-control? A whole bunch of people that are talking about him and wishing the worst for him, and are excited by the fact that he's not there anymore. That's not self-control. I don't have I don't how if I can't say that he belongs to Christ, then I can't really say it about anybody, because I see all of the fruits of the Spirit, all of them, every one of them I see in this man. And again, that doesn't make him a saint. That doesn't make him perfect. That doesn't mean he has a full understanding of exactly everything that is in God's mind and every truth. And he can make mistakes. He can be um, he he can be proud, right? He can have all the different things that are vices. But because he has all these fruits of the Spirit, none of those vices rises to the level of becoming a serious problem that inhibits him from exuding his Christianity. And so it's okay to find fault with some part of his theology, and to hope that he changes, and to pray for that change. But let's rejoice in somebody in office, all right, a public person who is seen by many people in this world. Let's rejoice in somebody who is displaying the fruits of the Spirit. Because I'm afraid that we have a lot of Christians, and Christianity is known among like people I know that aren't Christians. They're not known for the fruits of the Spirit. They're known for what's on the previous page, right? They're known for jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, factions, envy, right? Forms of idolatry, strife, hostility. That's what people are seeing in the church now. And they're seeing that's what the public face of Christianity is, because there are so many that are belligerent Christians who, in this case, they're even seeing it with Francis Collins. They're like, look at it like, how could you throw stones at this person who is so well respected and seems to be doing exactly what and acting just like what Paul is saying a Christian should be like? And then they look around and they say, why are these people doing that? Why are they casting stones at Francis Collins and reveling in the fact that he's not there, and have all these different rumors about why he's not there, why he's stepping down, none of which are any kind of thing that would be flattering, right? But without knowledge, I didn't point it out, but those tweets that I referenced, they were references to articles. They're articles in Infowars and Breitbart, and I read the articles. I looked at them. There's no facts in those articles. They're just, you know what? This is an interesting correlation. And so therefore, because there's a correlation, maybe there's a cause here. But that's not what the people who share those articles see, right? They don't see that correlation as just like that the articles are just a suggestion, a possibility. They take it as the truth, right? And so they want to tear down somebody that they see as that they disagree with, right? They disagree with their view on vaccinations, or they disagree with their view on abortion or something like that, right? And some of those issues are really important issues. But I don't know how many times I have to say it. I mean, these fruits of the Spirit are what we look at and be able to identify a Christian by. So Francis Collins has been extremely generous with his time. Uh, so many podcasts. There's no excuse for not knowing Francis Collins. And by knowing, I mean really getting a feel for who he is as a person, because there are lots of videos out there. And this one's a really good one. He spends time with N.T. Wright, theologian, and they're talking about coronavirus. This is actually early on in the pandemic, so it's a little bit outdated with respect to what they're talking about at the time. But the gentle nature in which he is talking about coronavirus and what needs to be done and how to resolve difficulties and disputes is really important to hear. And N.T. Wright offers a lot of valuable insights as well into how we as Christians should be responding to these kind of events. And they even tackle the difficult topics of like, why is there a pandemic? Like, why would God allow a pandemic to happen and so forth? Francis Collins is interested in understanding God's world fundamentally, like what is this world that God has made, and he wants to make that world a better world because he's created in God's image. We are all here for a reason, right? Everything he's doing is to glorify God. What's man's chief end? Westminster Confession, question number 1. What's man's chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And when I look at somebody like Francis Collins, I see that that is what he is trying to do. He's trying to glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's an amazing witness. Hi, yeah, here I am. All right, yeah, I've said a lot, and I've not said it as well as I would like to say it, but I hope you feel my passion for this topic. um, I wish I could I express the fruits of the Spirit as well as Francis Collins does, because there are so many times that I don't, and I have so many faults. Um, and I'm the last person who should criticize Francis Collins for a little nitpick on areas that I think he's wrong. Now, I do think he's like I said before, I think he's wrong on some pretty important topics, but they're not important to the point of he's wrong, therefore he can't be saved. He can't be a Christian. Absolutely not. Um, there's one other thing I want to add, and that is the witness of Francis Collins to the non-Christian. I see it. I really see it a lot. I mean, I know a lot of non-Christians in academic fields, right? In biology, and they interact with Francis Collins. And I know people that know Francis Collins, meet Francis Collins, serve on panels, and have talked to him, right? And I know that when he was originally put up by Obama, there was some skepticism, right? Because they knew he had written this book and he was involved in biologos and like, oh, there's this Christian and we're going to put him in charge of this really important research program. It's like, can a Christian really do research? But there were so many people out there who weren't Christians who said, no, he absolutely can do this job because they've seen that he is able to um, that he's not going to be an ideologue, right, for religion, that he's not there to proselytize every single person and say, like, you have to believe this, or I'm not going to give you money, or something like that, right? He's going to be fair. He's going to be objective looking at programs. And so going back to like, okay, so like I said, I know a lot of people who know Francis Collins, and I really, it's so rare that I run across somebody who has anything negative to say about him. They see his fairness, his ability to work on difficult topics, to come to resolutions. If you've heard him talk, you know that he's very articulate. He's so easy to like, and he can resolve um, really tough interpersonal issues that happen all the time in science. I know that there are those that clearly will have like, he's going to give this much money to this group and not as much money over here. He's in charge of a very large budget, right? And so people are like, you should have spent more money on this and this project is more important. And they would like disagree and they'd probably be upset. Um, and they might think he's wrong. But most of them are still able to look at Francis Collins and say, I would still rather have a person in charge who I disagree with the decision they made, but I can see they have a heart for trying, for evaluating the evidence, for making the best decision they can with what they have available. Um, and I wish he had decided differently, but at the end of the day, I still prefer that over what a lot of people are, right? Petty, you know, prideful, power hungry, you name it, like what a lot of politicians are, and who are not making decisions that are wise decisions, right, based on the needs of everybody and making decisions that might not be in their own specific best interest. But I think people look at Francis Collins and say, you know what, he will put aside his own personal like agenda in order to make the best decision. Like I said, not every single person on the face of the earth is going to agree with that. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be upset and might feel like he did them wrong. And you know what? Like I said before, he's a sinner and he might have done somebody wrong at some point. He had the wrong, somebody did something and he's a human being, didn't like that, and maybe that entered into his decision making. Um, if anyone here watching this can say that that's never happened to them and they've been so incredibly fair to everyone in their entire life that they can hold everyone to that standard, well then okay, but I think we've all experienced that. that failure. I'm sure he's experienced that failure, but the fact that he doesn't experience that failure very often is a rare, rare trait, right, in human beings. Um, and so once again, I just can't express enough that he is uh, an absolutely wonderful witness for Christ. And we should be celebrating that we have that witness in the position he's been in, and that we've had somebody who has been making decisions that he feels is in the best interest of everybody. Um, Disagree with the decision, but don't question, I think, his motives. Don't question his character involved in that. Dr. Collins, I really wish you a great retirement. And actually, I know you're not really retiring. I know you're still going to be working hard in other capacities. And I do look forward to seeing what you're going to do in the kingdom of, for Christ. And I am sure that Christ has a plan for you, and you will be a willing servant to attend to that plan. And I certainly hope to be able to benefit from that, because I have certainly benefited from your wisdom and your character, and I do look up to that. So thank you very much. Um, that's it for me today. I think that's enough words for one evening. All right. Bye bye.